Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sammy Leung, the host of today's webinar. I lead the practice of climate and sustainability with PwC, and today it's my honor to host this webinar section relating to sustainability and responsible investment. Next to me, I have Shani Huang and Patrick Zheng. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves.
Great. Thank you so much, Sammy, and thank you to the organizers for having us. I'm Shani Huang. I'm the head of sustainable capital markets for BNP Paribas at APAC. What it means is that I work closely with companies and investors to bring the much needed capital to sustainable projects. In addition to that, I'm also the Vice President and Secretary General of Hong Kong Green Finance Association.
Shani apparently is a busy person. She wears two hats at least, that she tells us. So Patrick, introduce yourself.
Thank
please.
you, Sammy. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you to AFF and HKTDC and PwC to organize this webinar. I'm obviously the most junior of the two ladies. So I run a family office called Sangs Group in Hong Kong. So we're a China-focused family office investing globally in sector and location agnostic projects. We mainly focus on technology, and we're looking to do a lot more impact projects, and we list the companies in Hong Kong, the UK, and the US.
So for the audience who have registered, apparently today we have a financial service focus. So we have the investment angle from the family office, and we also have the bankers who are with us today to share us their thinking and what they're seeing in terms of sustainability, the business, what does that mean, and using financial service as the example. So with that, shall we start by having our first topic, sharing us a few thoughts around what does sustainability mean to your business, your organization, and your role? Maybe I'll have Patrick start first.
So first of all, we are a fourth-generation single-family office. So of course we look to invest into projects which obviously make money and make profit. And around 4 or 5 years ago, we redesigned the structure and the vision of the company, where we're investing in projects which have positive influence and have social impact. We're not completely green finance projects focused, but if there are projects which can help both, it has to be sustainable in terms of profits, but also in doing good. So things like tobacco, arms, things like that we don't touch. It's only good stuff. But in light of the recent COVID experience, we've had everyone's had a big reboot of how to do things, what to do differently, and so on. And as a company, as a human being, we have to do things a bit more responsibly. And as a result of that, we have to make sure that we're investing into the right projects. So, for example, industries that we're looking at more closely are, for example, like plant-based investments. And if you look at in the US, the figures like mind-boggling, where they're increasing, for example, the plant-based eggs, it increased, I think, like 119% last year in the US alone. It's only a $5 billion market right now, and it's only going to grow. So it's teaching us and the younger generation to, eat less meat. We're reducing carbon emissions. So things like that we're trying to do more of. And the company is adopting an approach to try and do more of the SDGs under the UN sustainability goals. So we're proud to say we have 60% of our company are female, which is goal 5. Goal 10 is reducing inequality, and then goal 17 is partnerships. So we'll try to use business as a way of doing as much as we can for the sustainability aspect. But one thing I wanted to share with everyone today is more on, what we see the most powerful people on the planet are the entrepreneurs. They're the guys who innovate, that change the world. And our job is to spot the right entrepreneurs, invest into them, help them to change the world, and hopefully to make the world a better place. So that's what we're trying to do.
Great. Before I pass the time to Shani, I'll just speak to the audience in the webinar. The goals, the SDG that Patrick mentioned, he's referring to the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. It's very, very impressive that we have a family office owner who could memorize the number. Some of the members of my team, they're learning the number and try to memorize that, but hearing someone who actually owns the business, walking the talk, integrating the thinking in the investment, and really integrating the goals to the beliefs and turning that into investment decision. I'll get back to you on to learn more from that. So Charlie, what does sustainability means to you, your organization, and your role?
Great. To just really build on what Patrick described, right? Sustainability is really here to create and foster business longevity and financial success without sacrificing the environment, the people. So for a commercial bank like BNP Paribas that provides capital and facilitate capital flow, our general objective is to really support to direct capital flow towards this area. So, let's take Paris Agreement as an example, because Patrick talked about a lot of the social aspect as well, plant-based lifestyle. So, climate change is something that is really close to everybody, every organization's priorities right now. So we want to align our business activities, meaning financing and investment, to the Paris Agreement. So we have been doubling financing to renewable energy projects since 2015, and we achieved our target before 2020, the end of 2020. 16% of our financing is directly aligned to the SDG goals as well. And so we want to continue to build more using leveraging capital market, leveraging our own balance sheet to support the transformation of our of business clients that we work with towards a more sustainable, low carbon future.
Right. When in my day-to-day job, talking to clients, including investors and banks, and they often ask us, PwC, about should we adopt the SDG? Is that just something I should reconcile? Is that for disclosure? Is that a strategy? How do we really use it and mean it in our day-to-day? So we'd be keen to learn from, have the two of you to share your journey and how to really do that in your day-to-day. And I think, Charlie, you mentioned the Paris Agreement and the role as an investor and the banks, which is very important. She mentioned a few times directing the private capital in driving and making momentum along the Paris Agreement. Many people heard about that, but they don't really appreciate or not necessarily appreciating the forces and why this is so significant. And that's the whole design of Paris Agreement, not counting on just legislation, not counting on government setting rules and public policies, because we all understand that it's urgent, but relying on the governments, on the legislation probably are not efficient enough. So that's why in this first webinar, we also have the banks and the investor, because you represent the private capital, and that's believed to be a very effective means in driving changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to really echo some of your thoughts, if you look at the action on banks, there's no regulation out there asking us not to finance the thermal coal sector, not to finance tar sand, shale gas, for example. So we are one of the very few banks who have made a clear commitment that we have withdrawn from this business, and we have set a very clear timeline for 2030. By 2030, in OECD countries, there will be no more thermal coal that we would take part in, and 2040 for the rest of the world.
And later when I ask you about the challenges, because the French-based firms, I'm generalizing, are being famous that you guys are better. Of course they could do that because they are European-based bank, but there are regulations, there are awareness level in that part of the markets, in Germany, in UK, in France, we're seeing more regulatory to support that. So I'll ask you a bit more on that. So green, environmental, lower carbon economy, and on the social side, generation, the mindset change, being responsible, and helping entrepreneurs to prosper. So that's very. I think we will be touching on a few things that people probably would be keen to know more. Probably I start with on Patrick's. How did you guys started to have this change? You mentioned fourth generation, and is that like something that inspire And when you started, are there any challenges in particular you're seeing? Do you need to win some debates, or you're getting all sort of support, and how do you overcome, if any?
Great question. So I think, most Hong Kong families, the major portfolio is real estate. And real estate is not really the most green industry. And I took over the business once my father passed away like 5 years ago. And we did a major reboot of thinking of what we want. And one of the major issues that I think we've highlighted in the last year or two is Hong Kong is a very slow place to adopt the green policy. Obviously, Charlie and yourself in the multinational platform is slightly different. But in terms of green, environment, climate, all this kind of big global issues, I think Hong Kong as a society, we're kind-hearted and we want to care, but we're still very far behind our Western counterparts. So what we do need, I think, is the government support organizations such as HKTDC and AFF and PwC to help to educate the young people, especially. Obviously, people in my father's generation, the way they think is very different to the millennials now. So millennials will definitely take this to heart more than the older generation. Again, I'm generalizing. So this is affecting the whole way of how, not just family offices, but companies in the way they talk about succession planning. How does it affect our long-term planning in terms of what kind of industries, or how does it affect the percentage of our portfolio of what asset classes? So that's an important thing to discuss and talk about from internally our side. So education, I think, is key, and I think it needs to, and obviously everyone knows how great the problem is, temperatures rising, carbon is, we're not going to go into that today, but it needs a combination of both the government, the public sector, the private sector, the schooling, the education, and actually people taking action, and not just, oh, it's great, it's just buzzwords, right? And we haven't gone to such an extreme of some family offices where their 100% is only social impact, or only climate, or only green. We're trying our best to take baby steps to try and get there. But at the same time, the business has to be sustainable. Because I think for SME companies, it's very difficult to say, oh, we're going to be green, but it's okay not to be making money, because we all still have to eat, right? So from the family office standpoint, is we're improving year by year to try and do as much as we can to help with combating the global problem.
Right. Curious to just a quick follow-up that when you start proposing the idea, then branding it under responsible investment or impact investment, did you face any pushback? When you took over and then you had this idea and you want to make a case, were there any concerns, or would that be jeopardizing the ROI? Does that mean that we are turning into a more NGO? Because that's still a very common question in the asset management space, that many firms would assume, oh, now I'm doing exclusion, no alcohol, no gaming, all those are lucrative. So how did you make your case and win it?
So I think that there's definitely not, the simple answer is yes, there is.
Noises.
I wouldn't say it's criticism or against, it's just people would say, but it will it not affect, because there's a stigma that green climate and all the general good stuff has a perception of lower returns, right? And probably factually it probably does have lower returns, but it's increasing as time goes on. So I think it was quite a lengthy process to be able to get through the committees and so on to ensure that we were able to implement some of the plans that we had.
Right. So turning into Charlie, I guess any challenges, or like maybe in BNP case or in GFA, Patrick mentioned the Hong Kong, maybe something we could do better, education awareness, so anything you want to comment on?
Yeah, I think there are plenty of challenges, and for someone who have been in sustainability for over a decade, we have seen plenty. And I think what happened in the last 5 years has definitely been a game changer than the last 10 years combined. Right?
True.
So I think for Hong Kong, it's extremely important to actually have an ecosystem that supports sustainable development. So it's not just the banks; it needs the participation or active participation of asset owners and asset managers, so that the money are really favor towards sustainability. At the same time, we have to build up the sort of credit risk capability to assess environmental, social considerations which have not been factored into the equation, in the past, right? And it's not just credit risk; it's the same thing as equity valuation, financial valuation in general. So I think the ecosystem need to build up. Everyone has to play their part, and that's precisely the reason of Hong Kong Green Finance Association. We wanted to create a platform for the industry to grow, to raise the awareness. At the same time, engage with policymakers, which are critical in addressing the environmental or social externalities. That's why you run into a situation where non-ESG or non-environmental friendly or non-sustainable, unethical business outperform the green ones, right? So we need to have the sort of regulation intervention to change that dynamic. And the market itself is also responding well, like the plant-based, lifestyle that you mentioned earlier, right? So consumers are powerful in addressing the market dynamic. So same thing that's happening in the sort of automobile industry.
Yes.
We are really looking at the future is really looking at electric vehicle. There are companies are planning their hydrogen, fuel cell, strategy and R&Ds. So I think, traditional business model no longer become relevant if we're talking about the medium and long term. So companies need to think ahead, and that's what sustainability is about, right? To be future ready, as well as be relevant currently. So, so at BNP, our conversation with our clients is exactly the same. How do we help you, using finance, our own capital, as well as the capital from the market, to be future ready? So, in the green bond world where I, take up most of my day to day, so we help companies, develop their sustainable financing program, help them understand the underlying, asset eligibility, and then link them up to $1 trillion of sustainable capitals that want to support, these sort of assets and developments.
Right. I think you mentioned 2-3 things I'm going to pick on. Risk management, and then the business opportunities, and also the business transformations. So on the business transformation, for instance, I think at the moment it's still it's a bigger momentum now. We're getting more traction, but there's still quite a focused community who are aware of that and who are driving. We are seeing the needle is moving, but so I think, in my view, from my day-to-day dealing with financial service and also non-financial service, you mentioned the automobile business, plant-based. For those who get it, they probably will be rewarded significantly, because that's basically we are at the early stage of the curve, pretty much like the 20 years ago, and people talk about internet shopping. Oh, it's going away, and whoever act quick enough to transform, and it's a generation change, the whole consumer mindset, investor mindset, be it electrical vehicle, be it another new lifestyle, that's probably going to be the future. And day in and day out, we were talking about, and probably no one know who will be actually the winner of that. But I guess we all believe that whatever the 10, 15 years ago would look like, that economy probably have something that the three of us haven't seen it yet. Yeah, that's just my guess. So that's the transformation, and that's the opportunities. And the other point I want to, since you mentioned the risk part. And you mentioned, the government, so the policies maker. When we talk to people about sustainability, it still could be a nice to have. Okay, it's your philosophy. You want to do good is your thinking, or you are interested in that newer business, that's an option, that's a choice. But the policymakers are looking at how financial service banks, investors, how they're addressing the environmental and climate risk. And the HKMA has launched some common assessment framework, pushing the agenda. The SFC have also launched paper, forming working groups. So it's out there in the market. It probably means that it may no longer just be nice to have or an option that you're interested in the business. It's basically a part of the equation to do business in that sector. So what is anything you could share in your space?
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's becoming something from nice to have to something that organizations have to do. Take the banking sector example, right? We have very stringent, at least ourselves, we have stringent, CSR policy, corporate social responsibility policy. There are sectors that I mentioned that we are not allowed to touch or can or have to slowly or quickly withdrawn according to the timetable that we set for ourselves. And at the same time, we have 9 sector policies that we have to follow, particularly when it comes to environmental sensitive, sectors like paper and pulp, for example, right? So agriculture, something that we follow very carefully if we want to do business with clients in this area. So apart from, risk mitigation or risk management, we certainly look at the opportunity side. Like we set our target to double financing to renewable energy. So you can see we are transforming our utility portfolio from carbon intensive to climate friendly, to climate leading position, right? So that's the direction of travel that we are doing, and we are not alone, so some of the industry leaders are doing something similar. So it's good to have more participation from everyone, and the regulator sort of activities that you mentioned, like in Hong Kong, we have Hong Kong MA developing the common assessment framework for banks, basically pushing the banks to assess how green is your portfolio. So that will be instrumental in mainstreaming, green finance at every single bank, under Hong Kong MA's regulation. Similarly, on the asset management side, you certainly see the regulator is also pushing that, encouraging asset owners and asset managers to better integrate ESG. And this is being coincided by the effort, run by Hong Kong exchanges, right, with the upgraded, ESG reporting guide. So every part has to move towards the same direction to make it work. Going back to the point that I made, it has to be a proper ecosystem so that we fought for a mainstream, sustainable finance.
Absolutely. I think, and also to Patrick's point earlier, that the education level, the awareness building, and what the government could do, and that's also probably why in the last 18 months, 2 years, we are seeing, the momentum sort of really accelerated. In addition to the SFC work, the HKMA work, now that we're seeing they have formed the 7 agencies cross-sector, covering the insurance regulator in addition to the 2, then the exchange and the environmental bureau. So they're doing quite a bit to really push the agenda. So, still a lot to do, I guess.
We're at the beginning.
On that note. I think we touched a bit on the business opportunities, and probably asking Patrick, since you start this journey, probably there are some success and some really positive learnings about the opportunities, and you want to at least share with us, and also inspire the people who may be, doing business in Hong Kong, or who may be, the overseas audience that they want to compare notes, etc.
Sure. From a business opportunity standpoint, Hong Kong, we've had a lot of turbulent times in the last 12 months for different reasons. And from a businessman and investor standpoint, where there's chaos and troubles, there's always opportunity. So I think I'm digressing a little bit in terms of it's not just the green part, but where there's trouble, there's always opportunity. So we tend to try and see where the opportunities lie, and then make obviously the relevant investments. But let's take the COVID situation as an example. So I think from January to April of this year, the carbon emissions have dropped, almost like 20% or thereabouts. And it just shows you that if everyone is doing something, like what Chowni is saying is, if we all concerted together to do something, be it forced or otherwise because of the lockdown in various places, we've seen that we can actually change. And it's actually very dramatic in the US and China. So, and then we see, big problems like pollution, where China and the US, I think they do something like 40% combined total of the world's like fossil fuels burning, right? So these problems have to be addressed, they have to be tackled, and they have to be solved, and it has to be done by entrepreneurs, scientists, and experts, and obviously aided by professionals like yourselves, to be able to turn it, like Chowni says, mainstream. And there's opportunity there, right there. And as we say, is because of the momentum of the government, private, public sector all coming together, it means that the more support, it will gain even more momentum. And that's where, from our side, the investment side, we have to capture that moment and look at what kind of things to invest into. Obviously, things like we've been investing into is like live streaming companies and so on, where people are going less to work, or staying at home, so they have to watch content, right? We've also seen less cars being used, less transport being used. I mean, obviously, Hong Kong is probably not the best example because we haven't really been under a lockdown,
We get more blue skies, we do.
Yeah, right. We're going more blue skies. Well, we definitely, I think, more blue skies because the factories have closed down in China. So it's about pinpointing where the opportunities are and going at it. And at the same time, if we're able to do good to the world as well, then we make an effort. It's not we have to maximize the profits. If so, then we could just do esports, gaming, or whatever, which we don't.
So for the entrepreneur out there who are looking for capital to support the business, and so I guess that's like hope for them that there's an asset owner, they're keen to support some younger, smaller entrepreneur. Either your case are relating to environmental, or your solutions may be helping the society to be a more sustainable, more equal, more friendly, basically focus on the right thing, and there's a support out there, and I'm sure that Patrick is not the only one. So I hope that the audience in the webinar would get some encouragement out of that. So success or business opportunities that you experience?
Absolutely. I think we've seen a massive surge of financing towards the social development in light of COVID-19 pandemic, which really exposed, the vulnerability in our social infrastructure. If you think about healthcare, we did not have sufficient healthcare to respond fast enough and well enough, in today's challenge, right? So we have seen the capital market responding very quickly with a massive surge of issuance of social bonds, by multilaterals, by sovereign agencies, as well as the private sector. So they are really turning to the capital market to raise funding. We have seen like jumbo deals, like the World Bank, AIIB, like last week priced a 3.5 billion RMB Panda COVID bond, which we are part of the arranging banks. The dedicated proceed is to support COVID response in healthcare development, right? So we have also seen COVID social bonds directing the capital to the SME sectors who have been hard hit by pandemic for liquidity concern, as well as many other problems. So you can see, the financing market, or banks, the capital market in general, are doing its part, to help raise funding to support what is urgently needed today. So certainly we've seen that opportunity coming from COVID. But I don't think opportunity is the right word. It's more like providing the solution to today's problem. And I think the silver lining coming up from COVID is certainly nature taking a break. I heard dolphins were swimming in Hong Kong recently. I did not get the chance to see it, but that's what I heard. Not sure it's true.
I saw pictures.
But certainly the water has been a lot cleaner. In some of my hiking trails on the weekend. So nature is taking a break, and which really make us realize that do we really need to go back to the normal productivity to grow our economy? Probably we need to really think about reset.
Yeah, that's reset, a wake-up call, taking a break, or learning from a crisis, There were debates, different school of thoughts that what's the impact of that to the whole ESG thinking? Is that something we could put on a pause because we are dealing with a crisis? And a very large group of people believe that it actually helps the whole mindset of focusing on a more longer term rather than the quarterly short term, just profit, bottom line, over consuming, overproduction, and then all the whether or not we need to consider that the whole nice to have, and basically that's like a, let's press the reset button and, let me just show you what is nice to have and what's critical, which are pretty scary, but we all learn from the crisis a little bit. Before the crisis happened, or I think we are all, you're absolutely right that the COVID-19 triggered the social and the social bond and the social financing too. That's very quick, super creative. And people heard about the social bond but didn't really use it in this way. So that actually accelerates.
Absolutely.
And it involves a lot of creativity and also collaboration, work together. So, and that's the positive lesson. Without the COVID though, there are also quite many opportunities, even the new normal, when the crisis is over, let's say. There are new financing industry that they were in a hunger of capital. For instance, maybe real estate, maybe constructions, maybe other real estate. Then the green finance, investment and money lending. With the whole lens of green, it also gives them a chance to get some access to capital, even when their balance sheet is not super strong or they're not the best candidate in front of a bank. Traditionally, they may just get access on, let me look at your liquidity, and only the larger property developers could easily get the funding. So are you seeing any changes in that whole landscape as well?
I think in today's context where you actually do see higher exposure to credit risk, higher default rates, it is quite, the banks do act very cautiously. So it's very interesting to see who are pulling back and who are really supporting, right? So I think this is where a time where business need to be supported for continuity. So finance, sector does play a key role to make sure this business do stay and get through, the COVID challenges. So I think we definitely see that, sort of balancing act between managing, your credit risk exposure, at the same time supporting clients, in this industry. Quite proudly, BNP has been actually accelerating support, to our corporate clients as well as, our retail clients in France. So that's something that, we're quite proud of. We are also developing various, crisis, facilities, to help SMEs, as well as, various grants to help support healthcare development, education, and supporting vulnerable groups. These are the things that we are doing. But I think the finance sector is now the solution rather than the problem if you compare to the last crisis.
Yeah. You guys have become the good guys. That,
For a
you're
change.
being helpful, you are the enabler, and you're opening up some doors and enabling or help people out, give them a push in the times that they need. Which I think traditionally people separate the risk and the opportunities. And you mentioned credit risk. And I mentioned the environmental and the climate risk that the regulators are looking. With or without that push, even in the private space, if you basically allocate, let's say, even 2% of your AUM, but if you're doing long-term and either it's a real asset, either from money lending side you want to grant people a loan, 20 years time, then you really need to think about would they be around under some climate threats, or if they're doing some like a resort, getting money, then in certain areas that maybe the climate would be actually a disruption. And actually, it's a broader way to assess to evaluate the credit risk. Absolutely. Traditionally, we're just looking at 3 ratios, and it's done, check, and then go. But I think call that a risk, call that an opportunities. Everyone do need to integrate that part of the factor in the equation for those who are doing long-term and putting your own money into that portfolio. And that's just a message, I think, in terms of the whole PwC role in driving that dialogue, that we always remind or advise our clients to think about that. And whether it's an ask by the regulator or whether we really want to watch out for your own portfolio. So I think with all that, and we spoke about COVID, we talk about the more longer term perspective. So turning that into even longer term, Vision 2025. So Patrick, any thoughts that were you seeing the way forward in that context of sustainability?
So regarding 2025, it seemed a long time ago. It's actually quite near. It's only 4.5 years away. And things I agree with what Johnny said earlier. The last 5 years has been like turbo compared to the last 10, 15 years. But what's interesting is since Trump canceled the Paris Agreement, it'll be interesting to see, whether, who would win the presidency and how that will affect whether next year, if he doesn't win, will they go back to what they agreed, previously. And I think that could be a turning point because number one is the US-China relations could get better. If the next president came in this case, if it would be Biden, then would he then do something different to what Trump has done? And would these two major geopolitical events happen to push this forward, I think that'll make a big change. And I think the whole COVID experience has, like you said, not just from an individual standpoint, but from a company and society standpoint, I think people are looking at global issues very differently than they are before. So hopefully that gives us hope these changes can be implemented.
Right, well, very well said. It's a lot of moving pieces.
Absolutely.
Definitely we're at the time of with high level of uncertainty. And Charlie, I'm going to pass the time to you to talk about that. And just so you know, I'm going to look at the iPad because I need to look at the Q&A just come in so that I'm not being impolite. And have a few minutes to talk about that when I'm looking through this, all right?
Okay. Yeah, I think, it's hard to believe 2020 is already halfway through and it's unforgettable year, so far, right, with the COVID pandemic. So I do hope sustainable development will become a long-lasting outcome as a result, because like you said, it's a big wake-up call to everybody. So how do we reset our business? And now, for economies, they're talking about post-crisis recovery. Can we develop, a stimulus plan that actually with the core, with a big focus on sustainability, if we think about creating jobs, can we create green jobs, sustainable jobs, as well as, industry transformation, technology transformation. I think these are the things that, governments as well as, financial institutions really need to think about now that the reset opportunity is presented to us. And for, end of 2020, this is where we will see governments will renew their national contribution for climate reduction, right? So this is something that we are extremely keen to see more ambition from governments. These would dictate how we're going to how our future would look like. Are we hitting the 1.5 scenario or 2 degree or even? So I want to be the glasses half full person. So I do hope there will be more investment towards sustainable development, and we are seeing the growth of AUM being dedicated on ESG. So hopefully we'll see more of that.
Right, if we are looking for examples to have more encouraging news, at least from in my capacity, we are getting more requests from clients to help them set targets. And some of them are sort of ambitious that they will adopt science-based model to push for that. So using that example around the world, the net zero pledge, like making a commitment openly to neutralize your net emission by 2050. It seems a super long way to go, but if we work backward, we're probably out of time.
Yes.
And that's
Yeah.
something really innovative
Yeah.
happen. And we want to be able to do a bit more than just crossing our fingers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because we're probably still around. And we want to be responsible to the
crossed.
generations that are behind us. So we are seeing a bit of increase in the interest, in the momentum. There are larger organizations.
Yeah.
They're not being pushed, and they feel that's the right thing to do. But definitely far from enough. So around the world, I think the MNC we're talking about over 100-ish that
Yeah.
they make that open net zero, which is not easy, but that's a change.
Yeah.
Massive.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the government commitment or the demonstration that they may be, or anything else that they would be maybe pushing, I wonder whether in your shoes of HKTDC, that what are the words in the Chinese market, the ESG disclosure. You know, people ask me, and I heard something, but you know, it's still like we are anxiously awaiting the push for the ESG disclosure and also similar policies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's just a bit of slowdown because of the COVID-19. For instance, the COP26 has been delayed from November 1st to April, and then now it's another couple of months.
Right.
But we still hope that the whole Vision 2025 would be positive and encouraging.
Yes.
Right? Now that we have 15 minutes-ish around, so I tried to look at this when I was listening to you and couldn't really multitask.
Did I distract you?
Because this is good and that's also important, so I was half listening. There are quite a few questions. I will start with one that, what are the challenges and opportunities for Hong Kong to become a green finance hub in the region? Unless there is volunteer who want to jumpstart, I will say.
I'll go first because
Alright.
I think I'm a bit more negative than I think Charlie would say, because I think, you know, Hong Kong has traditionally been, you know, in my opinion, we don't have that many, we don't really have entrepreneurship in Hong Kong. We're a city that trades in stocks or real estate, right? And as a result, the environment doesn't encourage entrepreneurs to build the business from ground zero. You know, we see taxi drivers, we see manual workers, everyone's trading stocks because everyone wants to make money, right? So the issue is because of also the education side is, apart from the government and other initiatives, the general society are not promoting enough of green issues. Secondly, it's because of the environment, it doesn't encourage and promote entrepreneurs to build new businesses. And unfortunately, is from a Chinese sort of cultural perspective, people are very attached to profit is number one.
Yeah.
And that's going to take a long time. Probably it'll take 1, 2, maybe 3 generations to change. Hopefully I'm wrong. And as a result, because of that, there's too many challenges and setbacks posed to our entrepreneurs. And this is not just to green finance projects, it's across the board, right? If we look at all the brand names, there aren't any real big Hong Kong brand names. We're all using Apple iPhones, we're all shopping Louis Vuitton or whatever. There's no Hong Kong brands. I mean, maybe there's some lesser, and it's difficult because we have a small population.
Yeah.
And if we don't encourage from the young age, it's very difficult, in my opinion.
Yeah. So that really goes back to the point of education and awareness building. So I think that, you know, Patrick's point is about, you know, Hong Kong domestically, the challenges in Hong Kong. But I also want to position Hong Kong as an international finance hub where, you know, the opportunity can come outside Hong Kong, and Hong Kong can become the leading finance hub for sustainable capital activity, you know, raising, right? So I think in order for Hong Kong to do that, there are many, you know, aspects that we really have to address. You know, do we have enough policy support to attract, you know, for example, green bonds or sustainable bonds to be listed or to be arranged, you know, out of Hong Kong, because, you know, Hong Kong is, you know, bordering mainland China. We're talking about Greater Bay opportunities as well, you know, Belt and Road opportunities, right? So there are plenty of sustainable projects being built in all these regions, these opportunities would be much larger than the opportunity inside Hong Kong itself. So how can Hong Kong become the go-to hub to arrange sustainable capital activity? So certainly, a favorable environment when it comes to green, capital activity. So there's the green grant scheme, which lasts for 3 years. So there is a consideration to extend the scheme to broaden it out from green to sustainable. Looking at what our peers are doing, not far from Hong Kong in Singapore, right? So there are lessons learned, that we can learn to strengthen Hong Kong as the go-to place for sustainability activity, financing activities. At the same time, do we have enough investors in Hong Kong that are openly supporting sustainability? And I actually do see a change, in the last few years. And I've been talking to large institutional investors, on a daily basis, right? So I have definitely seen a mindset shift from, good to have to something that being taken seriously. So, they are training up their equity analysts, their credit analysts, portfolio manager, on ESG materiality, and dedicated serious capital, as part of their AUM to address the issue, including some of the largest asset owners in Hong Kong are also openly favoring, ESG integration, right? So this is something that we definitely observed, in the last, few years than before. So with capital commitment, with a transparent market, and also a favorable policy environment for green, this is where you can really develop Hong Kong into a leading green finance hub or sustainable finance hub.
Yeah, I think, thank you both. There are points that you both made that I echo and resonate. Definitely the international finance hub, and both of us work across border basis. So Singapore is watching over, we are competing. Are you doing better? So it's healthy competition. I think we have we're really well positioned, and we're seeing the momentum. Definitely not enough, but definitely encouraging in a way that at least there are banks who would have statistics with loans that they're focusing on SME, which in the past it basically are not quite possible. But I do see your point when we have the, it's the mindset of, half glass that we're seeing that momentum, and I do feel the pain and how difficult for younger entrepreneurs, which they probably are facing some challenges, because I serve clients, both the institutional and also the entrepreneur, and we're trying to have a few programs to help the startup. And I was facilitating some green finance talk with some fintech months ago, before COVID-19, and Cyberport, Science Park, they all support them. But hearing from their story, I do know that it was extremely difficult. Get funding, get support, and then sometimes the banks ask for documentations, which to us accountants is easy. For them, it's like science-coded document, and they just need help. So I think platform like this also, that's why it's quite great in a way that they hear it firsthand from family office asset owners that there are channels that people who are interested in helping and investing, and not in charity base. You just basically believe in the product, you want to help them, and you see, at this part of your portfolio that you want to allocate so that it's a win-win situation. And at PwC, we also are looking for playing an active role in helping these sort of ES or G solution provider, either by lining them up to help solving some of the bullshit scam. Some of our bullshit scam, they are incubating some of the startup in a way, and many of them are doing that. So maybe sometimes we're ahead as a professional service provider, or maybe we will join, investing in some of them maybe one day. I think the whole ecosystem will evolve in a way it becomes so different. But in a way that we're helping each other to just basically line up the solutions to the problem sooner. So I hope the audience at least feel a bit of encouragement by, feeling, helping solving the ESG agenda, driving positive changes, has, definitely has a lot to do, but at least there are, new ways to help them to get there, even though we're very behind.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I totally agree with what Chownee's, very admire, and it's a very honorable thing what the vision is. All I'm saying is just it's a
long journey.
It's a hell of a task,
It is,
right?
but tough.
If we can help in any small way, then we would try to hopefully join in the journey.
Perfect.
Right. Okay. Now that let me read out loud. Patrick, that's a question from you. What do resources and perspective help you from your opinion and actions you can take for climate change? How do you imagine to drive transformation for Zhang's group and your activities to become more green? I think you probably cover a bit.
Yes.
If you want to elaborate 1 or 2 points.
Yes. I think I just want to put on record what Sammy was saying. We definitely are not a charity, but we do want to do good. We do want to make the world a better place by investing and doing good things. Good things meaning investing in the right vision of whatever investment that we make in. It's investing in the right people, and sort of digressing a little. The people and entrepreneurs that we invest into, they have to be like-minded, and they have to have people with integrity. So if they share vision that can fit in, for example, like the ecosystem vision that Chownee is saying, then if that falls into our purview of the investment criteria, then that's what we will go into. But I think during this COVID-19 resting time, as it were, we've done a lot of self-reflecting, both personally and also within the company as an organization. And we've just been exploring a lot on the SDGs. I've been memorizing the numbers and whatever. But
no, you did good.
but like you said earlier, it's about not just talking. It is about walking the walk. So we're trying a little bit just to get into it. And I think we're seeing, because of the momentum and also professionals and also other people outside even Hong Kong as well, that if everyone comes together with the ecosystem in mind, then I think more opportunities will come about. And as more opportunities come about, then we don't have to say, oh, we're investing into green projects. It just
it's a natural.
It's a standalone.
Project,
it's got potential, and it's got successful. It's got the right entrepreneurs, and with the extra tax breaks, grants, and so whatever when it comes about, then it's going to be even more attractive. So I think the opportunities are opening up, and we just have to act more quickly.
Yeah, and be creative, and I'm seeing a lot of more crossover, cross-sector collaboration, because the incentives could come from minimum capital requirement, it could come from tax, it could be penalty, but it could also be some positive support. That's one question for you, Charlie. I think it's built on the renewables and the operational, the transformation. So we have a question here. Asking, does that mean that some people may be, may lose their job because of that shift of the focus, with all these sort of reasons?
I wouldn't say it would lead to unemployment or job loss. There might be some short-term volatility, but I think as you transition from, conventional utility like coal and moving towards renewable energy or hydrogen, or EV, plant-based lifestyle opportunities, right? So the jobs will be transformed in more sustainable sectors. Sure. So I do not see it as a shock, on our employment or social aspect. Green is not at the sacrifice of people. Sure. I think there's co-benefits between the environmental aspect and the social aspects.
Yeah, I agree. And we're not saying tomorrow, and even the investors are not saying that I'm divesting 100% tomorrow. But we need a transition.
Yes.
And whoever are involved in certain business and sector, they could be retrained or adjust. Yeah. And I think it's very similar fear versus opportunities when people transform to digitalization. You could worry, you could haste that, but then you could also choose the path to upskill yourself. Yeah. and be agile, which is, I think, probably is the only way to survive in this highly volatile and an age full of opportunities and also challenges. So let me see whether there's quite a few questions. I think let me pick on this one, probably the last one. With the COVID-19 crisis, it seems the governments in most countries have shifted policy focus to economic recovery. What do you think the impact on sustainable development agenda? I think we touched on that, but I think it's probably a good way to wrap this up. Do you want to start first?
Yeah, I think it's certainly not the time to scale back on environment despite the health crisis that we are in. As government are pouring trillions of dollars, into the economy, this is where you can redesign, where the growth should come from, right? So if you look at some of the stimulus plan that we have seen in the market, Germany, 130 billion euro plan, and 40 billion is dedicated on climate, effort. Similarly, in Korea, they also announced a Green New Deal, in Asia with the 2050 net zero carbon ambition. So, this is where you can transform the economy in the next, years to come.
Absolutely. Just to add on that point, today I learned something like green deposits. So the consumer force could actually add on to the forces by they could demand that I want my money to be deposited, for green purpose. So even the bank may not react or the government may not react. The consumer also has a vote.
Exactly.
Anything you want to add?
I think totally agree with what Chao Ni's saying. Just to add on, to emphasize what Chao Ni was saying is I don't think the green movement has to be mutually exclusive to the economic recovery. I think economic recovery is paramount because of livelihood of human beings. And as Chao Ni said correctly, we can't sacrifice the green movement for lives or human lifestyles. But they don't have to be separate. It could be cohabited. But at the same time, we have to take this opportunity to be able to jump on. I mean, we saw the changes of the pollution coming down, carbon emissions coming down, airlines not flying as much. So it can be done. So we must jump on this extra opportunity to reset completely and to make the green initiative go, on a hockey stick rather than just, normal growth.
Yeah.
You're very well said. There's a saying, right? Don't let a crisis to waste. Definitely to build on that, and it's basically accelerated, and it shows us it could be done.
Yes.
So very well said, and I could not thank the two of you enough for all this great sharing. So to wrap this up, other than thank you to our speakers, thank you for the questions that comes in. Apologies for not being able to answer all of the questions. This is the first webinar that AFF is doing. Once again, we thank the HKTDC to host it, to organize this important series. So there will be a few more coming. And also just to announce that the AFF 2021 will happen in January. And definitely we will have more strong speakers to share us their thinking and the learning. Thank you very much. So now that we are going to a video, just to have the recap of last year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Asian Financial Forum 2020, bringing together over 3,500 government, global, financial and business leaders. Amid challenging times, the forum theme was redefining growth, innovation, breakthrough, inclusiveness, the subject of the opening plenary session where the Thai finance minister tackled this in relation to the country's upcoming new stock exchange aimed at startups.
Finding economic growth is very much the core of our national development strategy today. So I'm sure that there will be a lot of opportunities for Hong Kong in terms of investors, private equities, venture caps, and also for our business operators, the SMEs, the smaller guys, the startups to connect.
AFF 2020 was host to prominent speakers in the economic and financial worlds. The former US Federal Reserve Chair was keynote luncheon speaker on day one. addressing the policy framework of central banks looking forward to the coming year.
I think the U.S. economy is actually doing just fine right now. After raising interest rates toward a kind of neutral level, certainly they would be prepared to cut more if it seems to be necessary to keep the expansion going. There's been a trend over many decades all around the world for central banks to become independent and taken out of politics, but it's very unusual to have the president who criticizes the Fed as much as President Trump has.
The Day 2 luncheon keynote was delivered by the 2019 winner of the Nobel Prize for Economics, tackling the theme of financial inclusiveness.
Financial markets for the bottom half of the world's income distribution, probably more than that actually, the bottom 80%, really don't work very well.
Mismatches of talent and capital in Asia can be addressed through the Belt and Road Initiative, and Hong Kong can assist.
Belt and Road Initiative, in a sense, is bringing people into the market. And that's an extremely innovative idea. There is lots of missing opportunities in the financial markets. And Hong Kong is close by, especially to a lot of the poorer parts of Asia. I do think that something would come out of it.
Among panel discussions at AFF 2020 was one focusing on the evolution of global trade and supply chain finance, with inclusion and technology on the agenda to see a new period of global growth.
Pretty clear that the rulebook is being rewritten as we sit here today, and certainly the job of Standard Chartered is just to try to find a way to continue to extract the value for society from global trade without leaving quite so many people behind. There's the mechanics. Once the trade is taking place, how do we make sure that it's happening as frictionlessly as possible? And that's whether it's using blockchain for various forms of record keeping and transaction tracking, or whether using other forms of technology.
Bill Winters alluded beside the event to the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area blueprint for growth.
The Greater Bay Area represents a fantastic opportunity for China, for Hong Kong, for Macau, really for the world, to have this zone of 90 million plus people growing quickly with a heavy technology component, with Hong Kong as a financial center. That's a fabulous opportunity.
With opportunities for corporate connections through InnoTalks, the AFF Deal Flow Matchmaking Session, Global Investment Zone and FinTech Showcase, delegates from around the world were able to reflect on business related to strategic planning. For the UAE, its Investment and Promotion and Protection Agreement of 2019 with Hong Kong is part of the plan.
And we in the UAE are planning to develop further the financial services, and Hong Kong being a hub to that, and the Far East and a hub to really attract talents. We feel that this treaty really enhances the cooperation further. We have seen one of the sovereign wealth funds opening up their offices in Hong Kong, and we encourage the private sector to capitalize on this treaty as well.
The Asian Financial Forum 2020, living up to expectations for redefining economic growth.
I think this is a real platform that connects the business with the talented people. I think this is the real benefit of participation.
The dynamism, that people are vibrant, and the business opportunities that can occur during this particular week.